Podcast Theory.
Hello again, fellow podcaster, and welcome back to Podcast Theory. I'm your host, Jason Stracone, and after a few week hiatus, I am happy to say Podcast Theory is back and better than ever. Actually, I'll leave that determination up to you. I think we're going to be off to a good start, though, because today I'm going to pick up where we left off. If you remember the last episode / live stream / podcast, depending on how you're consuming this content, was tapping into all the great ways that you could repurpose your podcast recordings via the video format. Today, I want to take that another step further and talk about what you can do with your transcripts. And all of this is a way for you to work smarter, not harder. If you're using podcasting for your business, more than likely, it's just a small piece of the puzzle. What that means is that you are trying to make connections and communicate with current and potential customers on a number of different outlets. More than likely, you're building an email list. You're looking to build a social media presence. You're communicating through blogs, through your website, through videos. Any way that you can make that connection that showcases to a current and potential customer why you're a resource that they should trust is a great thing. And you should absolutely lean into it. Now, I've talked about this a lot here on the show. The reason why I love podcast content so much is because it's so versatile. There's so much that you can extract from one single podcast recording that can serve many of the masters that I just mentioned a few seconds ago. You have the audio format, obviously, and that's going to allow people to make that connection with you in a very passive way, meaning they can consume your podcast and get to know you and all about your mission and your message through the audio format while they are at the gym, in the car, on a bus, working out, taking a walk. There's a number of ways that they can put you in their ear, and they can spend some intimate time getting to know you and how you can help them make a transformation. That's never going to be replaced. But in addition, as I said, you're more than likely trying to reach people through videos. And as you can see, if you're watching the live stream, this is a video format where I'm also putting this content out there for those that may not like to listen to podcasts, but do like to consume videos. Also, the written component is a huge part of this. And again, many of those formats and those networks and those platforms that you're trying to create content for, all of it can be derived from your podcast. Today, I wanted to spend a few minutes sharing some of the ways that you can utilize all of this written content that comes from your transcripts and repurpose and transform it into something that is going to allow you to put valuable content out into the world to let people know who you are, what you do, and how you can help them gain that transformation they seek. But check off a lot of the boxes in regards to your marketing and branding at the same time. Before I dive into the 5 solid reasons or 5 solid ways that I feel you can repurpose this content, and again, these are just a few of my suggestions. There are probably many more ways that you have utilized this content. So once you hear this list, let me know what you're doing to utilize the transcripts. Before I dive into my 5, I do want to mention a service that I just started using. It's called Minvo. Minvo is awesome. I have to... There's really no other way to say it because we know AI has become a major part of our world, or artificial intelligence, if you're not into the whole brevity thing. And AI has done a number of things in the podcasting space to make our jobs easier as podcasters. I gave Minvo a test drive and knew almost immediately this was something that I wanted to use. To give you a quick synopsis of how Minvo works, you upload your video. And from that video, it cuts a number of clips that you can repurpose and utilize for TikToks, for Reels, for Instagram videos, for short stories, wherever you want to place that content. Minvo is finding the most quote unquote viral content it can from your large production without you having to go through and pick out those clips yourself. But what I also like about Minvo is not only does it do the video portion, and I should say that you can set it up to cut video clips in any time range that you want. So if you want short clips for Reels and TikToks and Shorts, then you can do that. But if you want to get something that's a little bit longer, you just have to change the time frame and it will cut a longer video clip. So you can share that on YouTube, maybe even Vimeo, whatever video platform that you are leaning into. And you can have a little bit more of a longer video without having to share the full length feature. There's so much to that side of it. I can't say enough good things. But what also really sticks out to me with Minvo is the fact that it pulls the transcript. It allows you to pull out quotes. It automatically gives you some quotes as well, which you can then turn into different audio, video, whatever you want to do with it. I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm going to talk about that here in a moment. But overall, a lot of the written component that you would utilize that transcript for, Minvo's doing the work for you. Of course, with any AI platform, it still requires a bit of human touch. So if you do decide to lean into Minvo, make sure that you're still putting your eyes on things and making sure that it looks good. Make sure the captions line up. Make sure the video is lined up. It does a lot for you and it will save you a ton of time, but please make sure that you do put your eyes on things to make sure everything looks 100% pristine before you share it with your audience. I'll put a link in the show notes so you can check out Minvo. And like I said, give it a test drive. It's a free trial to see if you like it. I have a feeling that you just might. So click the link in the show notes to check out Minvo, and you're going to be on your way to repurposing your podcast content with ease and clarity. Now, moving into the 5 solid reasons, or 5, I keep saying reasons, the 5 solid ways that you can utilize your podcast transcripts and repurpose them for other outlets. Let's dive in to reason number 1. Your episode show notes. Now, I feel that this is a component of podcasting that often gets overlooked. Sometimes show notes are simply a few sentences and they really don't give somebody an understanding of what they're going to experience when they tune into that podcast. Now, some people absorb information in a much different way. Maybe you're an audible learner. Maybe you're more of a visual learner. Maybe you're a learner that absorbs information and it sinks in more if you read it. So if you're going to the show notes to learn what that podcast is about, you want to be satiated. You want to know what you're in for when you press that play button. And believe me, you have listeners in your audience that think this way. So if you're not giving them good information in the show notes, then you're not really capturing their attention and thus making them take the next step, which would be to press play and listen to what the show is all about. This is cold traffic in many ways. A lot of times when people discover your podcast for the first time, they're going to go to those show notes and they're going to learn about the show via those notes. They may also check out the overall show description, but before they press play, they're going to look at those notes in some way, shape, or form. So pulling the notes from your transcript and repurposing them so they speak very closely, if not identical, to what a listener is going to experience is going to put you in a much better position to not only get a listener to click play, but also retain them. Because if they click play based on the expectation they drew in their own mind from those notes, if you deliver, they're more likely to become a long-term listener, meaning they're going to go listen to past episodes they may have missed, and they're going to subscribe and follow your show so they stay up to date on new content that you release. So leaning into your podcast transcript for the show notes, it's a no-brainer. Why stress yourself out trying to create something brand new when you've already utilized the platform to make the content? Now you just have to serve it up in a new way. So using this for episode show notes is going to put you in a very good place in regards to getting new listeners to look at your podcast, learn about what they're going to experience when they press play, and ultimately turn them into a long-term listener. Number 2, quotes and quote graphics. Now, I mentioned a minute ago, using Minvo, they're going to pull some quotes for you. If you want to create more social media content to put out there, maybe you want to create some captions, but to accompany those captions, you want to include a few powerful quotes from your podcast. This can be drawn directly from that transcript, and you can make them look fancy using a program like Canva to make some nice graphics that are very on brand with your podcast. But utilizing these quotes, again, already built into your content. You've already addressed this. You've already done this. Don't try to rewrite everything. Simply go to your transcript, find some powerful quotes, or as I said before, use Minvo and let that pull out the powerful quotes for you. But sometimes people that stumble upon your podcast via social media, maybe even via your website, wherever you include this content, it may be that powerful quote that makes them say, this sounds really interesting. I need to hear more about this. Then they take the next step and they go listen to your podcast. So using your transcript to pull out powerful quotes is a great way to repurpose and utilize this content in numerous ways. Number 3, blog posts and website content. Now, if you've been doing this for a while, this all may seem very boilerplate and very common sense, but if you're brand new, I'm here to tell you that this is something you want to lean into because, as I mentioned a few moments ago, listeners don't just absorb information and learn about you and why you're a trusted resource through the podcast medium alone. It may be a big part of it, but they may be looking at the videos first, or they may be going to your blog. Now, if you're not trying to use this content in that nature, and you're not trying to repurpose these transcripts into blogs and into content that could sit on your website and inform a potential listener / customer of why you are a resource they need, you're just wasting time, because if you're having to recreate that content from scratch, you're just starting over and it requires more work. This is a way, as I said a couple times already, to work smarter, not harder. Use this content in a way that creates very engaging, captivating blog posts. And in addition to having that blog where a person can read all about this information, you can set up what I like to call an episode hub on your website, where you can embed the video component of your podcast, the audio component of your podcast, any important links or resources that you want to share with your audience. And of course, that written component with the blog, it gives someone that finds that through search engine optimization, through someone that does follow your blog, maybe they're subscribed, and when something new pops up, they're jumping over and reading it. It gives them everything they need to know about your show. So lean into this hard, because you want to give your listeners a great way to find and discover you. And a blog is great for SEO. It's going to help build that organic visibility. But B, you want to give them everything in one place. It's like choose your own adventure. Give them an opportunity to lean into what you have to offer, but let them do it on their own terms. So if they want to listen to the podcast, they have that option. If they want to read about it, they also have that option. If they want to watch, you can see the trend developing, they also have that option. Another bonus is with your blog, if somebody stumbles upon that and learns about your show through that medium, there's a potential that they would click play and listen as they're on your site, thus increasing your site's retention time. That's going to tell Google and the other search engines that this is relevant information that people want to consume, and therefore that's going to boost your rankings and move you up the ladder. Blog posts from your episodes and website content, definitely something to lean into. Do not want to ignore this when it comes to repurposing. Number 4, email newsletters. This goes along with your blog content in a big way. Now, maybe not even just newsletters. If you're not sending a weekly or bi-weekly or monthly newsletter to your audience through your email list, maybe you're just looking for more ways to communicate with them on a daily basis or every other day. No matter what your schedule is, this content can help you reach out to your people and make a strong connection. In a lot of ways, you won't even need to mention that this is something that was pulled from your podcast. If you want to use it strictly to drive traffic to your podcast, by all means, go for it. But if you just want to make a connection and not just go into sales mode with your emails, but actually build that community strength and start to make those genuine connections that could lead to a number of great positive things in your business, pulling the content from your podcast transcript can do a number of things. And again, I go back to this time and time again throughout this episode. You work smarter, not harder. Instead of having to create fresh emails from scratch whenever you want to reach out to your community, you go to your podcast content. You find something very powerful and engaging. You pull that text, you edit it into an email format, and you send it out and make that connection. And it's a lot less work because you're not starting from scratch. You're utilizing content that you've already taken time to produce. Your email newsletters and your general emails as well are going to be very well received if they're crafted in an engaging way, and you save yourself a ton of time creating that engaging content by leaning into what you're putting into your podcast. This is one of my favorite things to do. I've done this a number of times with the emails that I send to my list and my community, and I'll continue to lean into this because it does make things easier. But again, I'm all about working smarter, not harder. And if I'm taking time to create podcast content, I want to get all the meat off that bone. I want to use it as much as I can. So keep this in mind for repurposing. Emails are big. And number 5, webinars and presentations. Now, you may be doing online webinars for your potential customers, for current customers, maybe even for your staff and your team. All that content can be drawn from your podcast. Again, need to repurpose it. Obviously, can't just be pulled and then thrown up onto a PowerPoint slide, and you can't expect that to do all the work for you. But more than likely, you're looking for visual aids to accompany any type of presentation, any type of webinar that you're creating. It's right there in your podcast. Going back to what I said at the start, the versatility of this content cannot be overlooked. And if you're not taking time to truly lean into it in this capacity, you're just creating more work for yourself. So if you're looking to create webinars that potentially bring new people into your circle, or if you're looking to continue to educate your existing audience through a webinar, through a presentation, all that content is right here on your podcast. And I'm going to throw a bonus at you today because this is one I think it often gets overlooked. Number 6, your podcast transcripts can be utilized to create the framework of a book. Now, me personally, I have not gone down this path, but I know many people that have. But think of all the words that you are spilling into your microphone when you create podcast content. And if you're not yet creating podcast content, let me be the first to tell you, there is a ton of poignant points. Is that even a poignant points? I feel like I'm stepping on my words and saying that, but there are a lot of ways to create captivating content that, of course, gets over with your audience in the audio format, but perhaps, as I said, some of your listeners like to read and they'd rather read to absorb and consume content. Putting a book together, having never done it, I can't speak to it, but having talked to a lot of authors, it's a lot of freaking work. But if you could get the bones of that book already written out, and then you just need to expand upon some points to fill in those pages and build those chapters, why wouldn't you want to use all of this content that you're putting into your podcast and put it into a book format, expand upon that, and before you know it, you now have a book that could become a bestseller? The framework of a book, very much overlooked in the repurposing space. Highly recommend, if you're even thinking about writing a book, maybe start a podcast first, because it's going to allow you to get a lot of those ideas that you have out of your brain and into the sphere, into the world where people can consume, and you'll learn a lot about how people are relating to that content and ultimately decide whether using it for a book is the right approach, or if you are dead set on writing that book, perhaps you'll get some audience feedback that's going to allow you to create more engaging, captivating content within those covers so your book can hit the market and take off almost immediately. Podcast content, incredibly versatile. That is the lesson of the day. I hope that I've drove that home, between this episode, if you go back to the last episode and learn about how you can repurpose your video content, I shared some out-of-the-box ways to make that work for you. So much can be done with this content that not having a podcast in your arsenal pretty much only means you're going to be working so much harder to check off all of those other boxes when it comes to creating content for your business. And you are already bogged down with a number of responsibilities. Why overcomplicate this? Why make it harder on yourself? Lean into podcasting, get all the meat off that bone, use it to make these powerful connections, but also create content that can be used for so many different things. Like I said at the top of the show, I would love to hear what you're doing with podcast content in regards to repurposing. So please hit me up at jason@bombtrackmedia.com and let me know how you've repurposed, whether it's video, whether it's written, whether it's even the audio portion of your podcast content. How are you repurposing this to make that genuine connection that you want with your ideal listener and ideal customer, and ultimately give them everything they need to know to tell them you are the resource that's going to help them build and find the transformation they seek? I think this is a great way to wrap up today's episode. So with that, I am going to end my spiel on repurpose your content here. I want to invite you back for the next episode because I'm going to address a very important topic in the podcast space. Now, if you've been paying attention to any of my content, I've grabbed a hold of one of the more recent stats I've heard about podcasting and really the lack thereof when it comes to longevity. 90% of podcasts don't get beyond 3 episodes. Mind-blowing to me because there's a very simple way to get around that. And I'm going to cover it on Thursday's episode or on the next episode of PodTheory. And I'm going to cover that on the next episode of Podcast Theory. You got to forgive me. I'm just getting back into the swing of things after a few weeks off, so I've been stumbling a little bit today. But thank you for being patient with me here on this reintroduction of Podcast Theory here in the live stream. Going forward, Podcast Theory will be coming at you every Tuesday and Thursday at 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, if you've listened to my episode of Let's Blow This Up, where I talked about some of the new changes I've been making, I did mention that new episodes were going to be Tuesday and Friday. I made the decision to do Tuesday and Thursday instead. So make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, make sure you're following on Facebook, and make sure that we're connected on LinkedIn, and you'll see when these videos are going to go live. That's another change I made. Podcast Theory is now coming at you, not just on YouTube, but on LinkedIn and on Facebook as well. It's been a blast getting this show up and running again as Podcast Theory. Only good things to come. I hope you're ready for it. So with that, I'm going to sign off on today's installment of Podcast Theory. And until our paths cross again, this is Jason Sircone on Podcast Theory saying to you, good talk. I'll see you out there.